This video is going to remind you how to perform some different operations on decimal numbers that include negatives. So the different operations are adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, and we'll go through each of them just so you remember how to do this. So this first one here, we have negative 2.1 plus 3.62. And actually what I'm going to do is rearrange this so that it's a little bit easier for me to think about. So I have 3.62, and when you add a negative number, it's the same as subtracting that number. So remember the flip and switch that we do for subtraction. We can also do it for addition to make things a little bit easier. And in this case, it is going to be easier because we're dealing with decimal numbers. So I'm going to switch this so that it says 3.62 subtract 2.1. So I've changed the operation from addition to subtraction, and I've changed this negative to a positive so that I'm subtracting a positive number. And now I'm just going to stack these and do my traditional subtracting method. Remember, your decimal numbers always have to be lined up, so my decimals are in the same place here, and we simply go from right to left. So 2 subtract 0 is 2, 6 subtract 1 is 5, my decimal stays in the same place, and 3 subtract 2 is 1. On this next one here, we are going to subtract, and again, I'm going to use that flip and switch idea. So I am going to change this so that it says 5 and 63 hundredths, add 1 and 8 tenths, because that's a lot easier for me to think about. So I flipped my operation to addition, and I switched my sign to a positive. And now I can stack and do the same algorithm. Remember, I'm lining up my decimals here, and my decimal is going to go in the same place in the answer. 3 plus 0 is 3. 6 plus 8 is going to give me 14. I have to carry the 1. And 1 plus 5 plus 1 is 7. So there is my final answer. Down here, I'm multiplying, and I think the easiest way is to use distributive property, but you can stack and multiply if you prefer to do that. So I know that this number is going to be 3, well, I guess it's a negative 3 plus negative 7 tenths, and this number here is going to be positive 1 plus 3 tenths. And now that I have that, I can draw my distributive property box here. You can also choose to use lattice if that's something that works for you. This is just my favorite method, so I prefer to use it. Negative 3 plus negative 7 tenths, and 1 plus 3 tenths. 1 multiplied by negative 3 is negative 3. 1 multiplied by negative 7 tenths is negative 7 tenths. 3 multiplied by 3 is 9. I have 1 decimal place, so I'm going to move the decimal 1 place from here to here. There's my 0 out in front, and it is a negative because we're multiplying by a negative number there. And lastly, I have 3 times 7 is 21. I'm going to move the decimal 2 places because I've got 2 decimal places in my question, so 1, 2 in my answer. I'm going to put a 0 out front just so it's a little bit more clear, and it is still negative because we have that negative on the 7 tenths. And now if I add all of these numbers together, I am going to get my final answer. So I've got negative 3, negative 7 tenths, negative 9 tenths, and negative 21 hundredths. And so I've lined everything up so that all my decimals are lined up there, and my decimal goes in the answer in the same place as 0 plus 1. I have 7 plus 9, which is 16, plus 2 is 18. Carry the 1. 1 plus 3 is 4, and my whole answer is negative. Finally, I'm going to do division, and I think with decimals it's easiest to use long division. So I'm going to set up my long division. I have 6 and 72 hundredths, and that's divided by 3. My decimal is actually going to go in the same place in the answer as it is in the question, so I'm going to place it there right now. 6 divided by 3 is 2. So I'm going to put the 2 up top. 3 multiplied by 2 is 6. And you can think of this as like an area model here. So the 6 is inside of a square. 3 and 2 are the side lengths. So the area is 6. 3 times 2 is 6. So I'm going to subtract 6. I end up with 0. I'm going to pull down that 7. Ask myself, what is 7 divided by 3? It is 2 again, with 1 left over. So I'm going to do 3 times 2 is 6, subtract, and I end up with 1 left over. I'm going to bring down this 2, and now I have 12. 12 divided by 3 is 4, which works out really nicely. 3 times 4 is 12, subtract, and I end up with a remainder of 0. Now, with decimal numbers, if you ended up with a remainder that was non-zero, then all you have to do is keep adding zeros to your question and pulling those zeros down until you end up with a remainder of 0. And if that doesn't happen after a few times, like maybe 4 or 5 digits, you can just stop and assume that it's going to continue on. So that is how you perform operations on decimal numbers that include negatives in different places.